When someone stops reaching out, people assume they've changed, that they don't care anymore. But most of the time, what really changed was how much they were hurting. It never starts with a decision. No one wakes up one morning and decides to disappear. No one plans to go quiet. No one promises themselves that they'll stop trying. It happens slowly, quietly, almost without being noticed. At first, you're still there, still checking in, still sending the message first, still asking how they are, how their day went, how they're holding up. You don't keep score, you don't complain, you don't ask for anything back. You tell yourself this is normal, that some people aren't good at initiating, that everyone expresses care differently, so you keep reaching out. And for a long time, you don't even realize how one-sided it's become, until one day something small lands heavier than it should. A message left on read, a reply that feels rushed, a call that never comes back, and suddenly you pause. Not because you're angry, not because you're trying to make a point, but because your body feels tired. This is the part people misunderstand. They think silence means ego. They think distance means indifference. They think pulling back means you stopped caring. But what they don't see is the emotional exhaustion that came before the silence. The kind that builds when you're always the one holding the thread of connection. People who stop reaching out are rarely careless people. They're usually the ones who cared the most. The ones who noticed everything. The ones who remembered details, the ones who sensed changes in tone before words ever changed. They gave without asking, they adjusted without being told. They stayed even when it was uncomfortable, and for a long time they convinced themselves that effort was love, until effort started to feel like proof they weren't chosen. There's a specific kind of pain that comes from always being the initiator. It slowly teaches you to doubt your place in someone's life. You start wondering if the connection exists only because you keep it alive. You start asking yourself whether your absence would even be noticed. That thought alone is heavy. So eventually the mind does something protective. It says, let's wait. Let's not reach out this time. Let's see what happens if I stop. That waiting is not peaceful. It's filled with hope and fear at the same time. Part of you wants them to reach out, just once, without being reminded. Another part of you braces for the disappointment if they don't. And when the silence comes, it hurts. But it also clarifies. Because silence gives you information, it tells you how much space you actually occupy in someone's life. This is where silence gets confused with coldness, but silence is often grief. It's the grief of realizing you were trying alone, the grief of accepting that effort wasn't mutual, the grief of letting go of what you thought the connection was. Stopping doesn't feel empowering at first, it feels lonely. There's an emptiness where your role used to be, a quiet where you once poured energy. You miss the connection, you miss the closeness, you even missed the version of yourself who tried harder. Not because that version was healthier, but because that version still believed effort would be returned. What people don't see is the internal battle behind this silence, the moments where you almost text but don't, the nights where you replay conversations in your head, the urge to reach out, followed by the memory of how it felt to be ignored. Silence becomes the only way to protect what's left of your self-respect. At some point, reaching out starts to feel like asking for permission to exist in someone else's life. And even the kindest people eventually stop doing that. Not because they feel superior, but because they feel worn down. This kind of withdrawal isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with speeches or accusations. It doesn't announce itself. It just slowly replaces effort with distance. For many people, this pattern started long before adulthood. If you grew up being the emotionally aware one, the one who sensed tension, the one who adapted to other people's moods, you likely learned early that connection requires effort from you. So you became good at it. You learned to initiate, you learned to adjust, you learned to keep relationships alive, and you carried that skill into adulthood. But no one tells you what happens when you're always the one carrying emotional weight. Eventually you get tired, not tired of people, tired of imbalance. Stopping contact doesn't mean you stopped loving. It means you stopped abandoning yourself to maintain closeness. And that shift is painful because silence gets misinterpreted. People assume you moved on easily, that you're fine, that you don't care anymore. But often the truth is that you cared so deeply you had to step back to survive it. There's a quiet dignity in this kind of silence. It's not punishment. It's not manipulation. It's a boundary that says, I can't be the only one anymore. And boundaries don't always look loud. Sometimes they look like absence. Sometimes they look like not sending the message you used to send. Sometimes they look like choosing peace over proximity. There's grief in this process. You grieve the relationship you thought you had. You grieve the version of the future you imagined. You grieve the effort that went unseen. And grief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like becoming quieter, more selective, more careful with where you place your energy. Over time, something begins to shift. You start noticing how you feel around people. You become aware of who drains you and who meets you halfway. You begin to understand that connection shouldn't cost you your sense of self. You don't become colder, you become clearer. Clearer about what you can give. Clearer about what you deserve. Clearer about the cost of staying where you're not fully met. There's a quiet strength in that clarity. You learn that reaching out is not a measure of your worth. That being wanted doesn't need to be proven through effort. That love in its healthiest form doesn't leave you feeling depleted. And sometimes you realize something painful but freeing at the same time. That some people only felt close to you because you kept the connection alive. That your silence didn't create distance, it revealed it. This realization hurts, but it also brings honesty. It teaches you that not every bond is meant to be maintained through sacrifice, that some connections only exist as long as you keep shrinking yourself. And once you see that, you can't unsee it, so you move differently. You stop explaining your absence. You stop chasing understanding from people who never asked how you were doing. You stop filling the silence that others were comfortable leaving. Not because you don't care, but because you finally care about yourself too. And maybe the most misunderstood part of all of this is that you still feel things deeply. You still miss people. You still think about what could have been. You still wish things had turned out differently. But now you also understand something you didn't before. That peace is not found in being constantly available. That closeness without effort from both sides is not closeness at all. That protecting your heart doesn't mean closing it. It means choosing where it belongs. So if your silence ever made someone uncomfortable, if your absence confused people who never noticed your presence, let that be information, not guilt. Because the people who truly value you won't need reminders. They'll feel the space you leave behind, and in that space you'll finally have room to breathe.